Okay, everyone, welcome to another episode of Psychonaut Sessions, your home for all things psycho. And I'm Daniel Moeller, and I'm sitting here with the one and only, the man with the greatest signature of all comics, Sam J. Royale.
Really?
Oh, come on, that's awesome.
I'm very proud of the logo. I'm wearing it right now, but Walter Simonson, he has a dinosaur for his signature. You can't top that.
Yeah, I mean, he's been getting enough clout for a long time. So
that's true. Let's talk about me.
Yeah, let's talk about you a little bit. It really is an amazing signature, by the way.
Thanks a lot.
I want to kind of start with that, if you don't mind, in terms of positioning. Did you just come up with this on a whim? Is this something that you had to develop for a long time? What's the process?
It really was a whim. I started using Sam J. Royale as a professional name, I think almost 10 years now, really close to 10 years. And yeah, I just kind of thought the name is pretty neutral sounding. It doesn't really denote anything about culture or ethnic background or whatever. So I thought, why not just keep it as neutral as possible and as invisible as possible? And the original plan was to only have that logo represent me, but here we are doing video stuff.
Right.
My attitude on that changed mostly around the 2016 election, because I didn't want to give anybody the impression that I was ashamed of my background or trying to hide it.
Sure.
It was really just kind of an experiment, because in 2012, prior to using this name, I was using my real name, which is much longer, and I would send out all these art samples and different things, and I just wouldn't get any response, not even rejections, but just no response. And I think it was really just laziness on their part, where they just saw a lot of letters in an order they weren't used to seeing them in. And so they just didn't get back to me. So then I figured I got to come up with a name. Made this one up with my good friend and roommate at that time. And I think he suggested, I actually have this handy. So this friend of mine, for my 21st birthday, he gave me this Pulp Fiction wallet. And so it really is from
Nice.
Royale with cheese. Anyone who makes that comparison is completely accurate. That is where the name came from.
I remember you bringing that up on Comics Lounge podcast with Ryan Balcom.
Yeah,
Yep.
I felt
Shout out to him.
Because it's really funny. My 10 minutes before Ryan and I started that recording, my wife told me, he's like, hey, I noticed in some of these videos, people are saying Royal instead of Royale. You should correct him before recording. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And I didn't really think about it. And then as soon as he hit record, it's here I am with Sam J. Royale. And I just got so mad at myself for why didn't I just listen? If I just corrected him before we recorded, like my wife said, would have been fine. But so I ended up correcting him in the video, and I felt bad about that.
Yeah, I've learned, listen to the wife for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They have our best interests at heart.
Oh, for sure. I mean, if we're lucky, right?
Yep.
And I'm definitely lucky. You held up that sticker with my logo on it, and it was my wife's idea to get them. She ordered them. She did the whole thing. And I kind of was rolling my eyes at the idea, and I've only sent a few out so far, and people have been posting them online like crazy. So it was definitely the right call, as usual.
This is a great call. Yeah. This is the board that I take out drawing at coffee shops and stuff. So I'm always drawing like this, so everybody can see all the cool shit that I promote. So love it. And it's definitely catchy. Your sense of design is incredible. It's always impressed me. So your palette of works. So Dishoom 1 and of course number 2 just came out.
Yes.
Man. So I don't even know where to begin with this book. It is definitely weird that for some reason changed the color scheme of everything.
I was going to ask about that. I thought you were doing some effects on purpose. Look at that. I think it's the bright yellow of number 2 that's just shifting your whole.
Yeah, that's odd. Well, I have these LED lights. This is my son's old room. And his LED lights are still on. But this book, this series, first of all, anybody who's watching this, you need to go out to Sam's site and get Dishoom number 2 right now. It's incredible. The whole series is incredible. And I didn't, at first I want to tell you my experience. It came in, and so I got out book number 1 so I could read them in consecutive order. Again, I like to do that whenever I get a new book in a series. I like to read what's before it. And I was like, it was my turn to make supper that night, and my wife got a hold of them in the studio, so she got to read Dishoom number 2 before me. And I just start hearing, I'm sitting there cooking, and I'm like all jealous because she's like reading Dishoom number 2, and I'd start hearing this coming from the other room. I'm like, I don't remember anything like that funny like in Dishoom 1. I mean, it's awesome, but I was like, what the heck? So I was so jealous. So yeah, not only do you just retain that kind of mythological masters of the universe awesomeness in the stories, and I love that the stories are kind of carrying over from the first to the second with the added stuff of Hourglass and whatnot. But the Yule crew was hilarious, man.
Thanks so much.
We both laugh. I mean, she'll laugh out loud. I rarely ever laugh out loud in a comic, and kudos to you.
Oh, thanks so much. That's one of the rare instances where I didn't take my wife's advice. She hates that story. And understandably, because it's without giving anything away, it just has a very immature sense of humor. My sense of humor hasn't really matured much since like age 12. Yeah. So it is what it is. I was actually just thinking the other day, like in 4th grade, the teacher called on me to read out of a textbook out loud in front of the class. And the word duty, D-U-T-Y, and the plural form of it, D-U-T-I-E-S, duties, kept coming up in the paragraph. And I couldn't contain myself. Still can't as an adult. And so like I can barely get through it. And I'm laughing hysterically, and no one else finds it funny. And we're 9 years old. Like, how can I be the only 9-year-old that finds duty funny? Right. But that was the situation. And so I'm losing it. And I'm like, okay, good. There's only like 3 more lines left. I'm almost done. All right, there, I did it. It's done. I made it through. And then the teacher's like, that's very good. Now do it again.
Oh my God.
It's like, I can't do it. And yeah, I mean, the humor in my comics is really not much different.
It's great. It was perfect. I think it was actually a really great compliment to the tone of the first one, because your first book was like a shamanic initiation in and of itself. I had to read it quite a few times, and I had to sit with it because it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. But I mean, even just the very first Black Tortoise and White Rabbit, there's so much esoteric symbolism in your work. And I'm, of course, I'm into that sort of stuff. Yeah. And I try not to read too much into that when people start bringing that into books, but also I can't help but it just affect me profoundly. I mean, even just the cover, I mean, you should do a tarot deck, is all I'm saying.
I started one a few years ago. I think I got 3 cards in and then I stopped. I should pick it up again.
Yes, you should. I would buy that and promote that sucker like crazy, because yours. I mean, you not only have that touch of being able to kind of understand the weight behind some of the symbolism, but you also have a great design sense, and not everybody has that eye. This is our first time talking, and so I was actually really looking forward to it because I know about your interest in those things, and I was really curious to see how you'd interpret it all, because it's something that I don't really talk about overtly much, and so like that's why I'm glad that it was able to get through, because I feel like it's really more behind the scenes, and a lot of it is, I feel, pretty specific to my experience rather than something that would be easily grasped. I mean, I feel like especially the 3rd story in the first book, the Theo portal. Yep.
I think that one especially, everything in there was stuff. I was just doing it one page at a time, not knowing exactly where it would land as I worked on it. And everything in there was stuff that made perfect sense at 3 a.m. And then I'd wake up the next morning and be like, what did I do last night? And I was like, screw it, I'm putting it out there anyway. And so there it is.
Well, it does land because you already had, I basically discovered you not through image grand design or anything like that, but because of the amount of hype people were pushing on this book.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's great to hear.
Yeah, it's what's awesome is you seem to be building. So this is the kind of crux and beginning of Helga Hale and like
yes.
her origin, so to speak, and 7-7. So first of all, okay, so I got so much to say about your stuff because I love it so much. Somebody needs to make an action figure line of your characters.
Oh, that would be amazing.
You totally have the set of character portfolio that I would collect an action figure set of. I want 7-7. I want Chandra. Is it Chandra or Chandra? How do you pronounce it?
Chandra, yeah.
The moon god. Oh my god. I love Chandra the moon god so much.
Oh, thanks.
The design and everything. It's so, I imagine Masters of the Universe, of course, I've mentioned that. And I think that was mentioned before in Comics Lounge, if I remember correctly.
I think so.
Any other major influences to your host of characters that you have in these books? And
so many.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest influences on character design for me, I was a big fan, still am, of Batman the Animated Series.
God, yes.
And I was 7 when that came out, and it really affected the way I drew from that point on. So it was a lot of really, really broad shoulders with tiny waists and legs. And everyone had a refrigerator box for a chin and a straight line for a mouth. And that was a really hard thing to shake. And I still haven't entirely, nor do I really want to.
Yeah, please don't.
Yeah, thanks. But that was definitely a big influence. And you mentioned the character Helga Hale, who was introduced in Dishoom 1. And I guess it's kind of a spoiler, but who really, we should just give that warning right now because I can't talk about the books without talking about the books. So if you really care about spoilers, I guess skip around. I don't know.
Sorry.
Fast forward a little. But I don't think I'm ruining anything personally if I share these details. But Helga Hale, at one point, her hair color changes from red to pink. And a big part of why that is because of Gem and the holograms.
Oh my God. That's so awesome.
That's an influence I think a lot of people wouldn't have guessed. But yeah, like I have an older sister and she watched Gem and the Holograms when we were younger, and I watched it too, and I genuinely liked it. Just like the opening theme song says, the Misfits in that show, their songs are better. I don't know if anyone prefers Gem and the Holograms to the
Hell yeah.
But yeah, that was a big part of why, because like I like to, I don't know how you work, but I work with a lot of background noise usually, and whatever I'm taking in finds its way into the work, and so I got to be careful about what I'm listening to and what I'm reading and what I'm watching, and so like I've actually fortunately or unfortunately toned down a lot of my comic intake because it would find its way in. And I didn't want to make derivative stuff. And so like, I could hold it up and show, but so in the first Dishoom, it was the first page of the Theo Portal story that introduces Helga Hale. And it has that 16 panel grid for most of that story. And it was because I was listening to an analysis of The Dark Knight Returns. And so like, that's like, and so it wasn't a conscious decision, but it happened. And I know that's why it happened. And so like, I was like, that book's already everywhere. You don't need to do more along those lines. So I've been trying to, like, when I'm working, I gotta cut out the comics. and get influences from other things. And so at one point when I was working on the Helga Hale story, I had Gem and the Holograms on as background noise. And for like 10 years, this character has lived in my head. She's always been a redhead. And then I thought, well, why not? Like there's already a transformation, spoiler alert. And so like, why couldn't the hair color change too? And then like yeah, that's basically it. That's why she has pink hair now.
Because she does go through transformation anyway. So that's an awesome influence. Okay. I completely agree. I not necessarily about cutting out the comic thing, although I will limit my comic intake when I'm working on something hardcore because of that, and because I do agree that everything spills over in whatever I'm working on, whatever I'm listening to. So usually, the music has to kind of flow in the same vein. Sure. If I have cartoons on in the background, they got to be in the same vein or whatever. And I'm usually reading stuff that has to do with the content of the story or something that's contributing to that. So it's like my whole life experience becomes a journey around the creation at hand.
How much of that is deliberate choice on your part? So you're going out of your way to find something that thematically fits what you're working on, or
it's actually very deliberate.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very I don't know what it is, and I don't think it's probably a necessity for my creative process, but I just like it. So right now, the Simon Myth comic I'm working on, anything and everything that has to do with that story, I just am absorbing. So the story even takes place in a very specific place in Colorado, the San Luis Valley. And so the books I'm reading right now are only books on the San Luis Valley. And stuff like that. I'm only listening to music that I know that the character would listen to.
Oh, wow. That's a good idea.
So it's just, I tried to just completely fit into myself into the story as much as I can, so that, while I'm in the creative mode, I'm not having to think too much about it. It can just kind of roll out because I'm already have absorbed it so much. It just rolls so much easier. And if I have a period of time, I don't know about you, but if I have a period of time where I try to do that, and then I have to have, like recently I had to have a break because I had kids graduating and moved, so I couldn't create for a while. It's been really hard to get myself back in, fully. Yeah. So I don't know where you're, how, I mean, do you go to that depths of, do you go to that level and depth of immersion for yourself? Or
now that you elaborated on it so much, I think maybe I should try it, but I'm way more fast and loose with it. I do the opposite, where whatever's around me, I let dictate what the tone is for what I'm working on.
Oh, cool. Okay.
I don't choose it. And so that's why, book 2 might have a story that has humor that the first one didn't. And, that's going to change. And it's just based on whatever is going on around me at the time and wherever my head's at the time.
Oh, no, that's nice.
I don't know why that feels right, but it does. So sticking to it.
Sure.
It makes it difficult to pin down genre, because it's like, well, what is it? And it's like, I don't know. It's whatever I felt like doing that day.
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah. That's what makes the Shoom so awesome. It completely does defy any genre. You touch on all sorts of things. And that's the great thing I think about doing an anthology too, is you can do one, specific genre of something, and then, okay, I'm tired of this, and you can jump onto something else. How did your art process change from issue 1 to issue 2, if at all? I mean, there's definitely, like, you went full on painting except for Yule Crew, it looks like.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of true. It's funny so the Yule Crew story is the only story in issue 2 that is actually much older. I did that in like 2015 or 16, and it was supposed to be in the first book. And because my wife hated it, I postponed it to the second book. And so I guess that's also partly why it's so tonally different. That was me 8 years ago, whatever, 7, 8 years ago. So Yeah, the style and the approach to art did change between one and two. In that, in book one, I was experimenting a lot more because partly why I chose to do this in an anthology format was so I could experiment and find what worked best for me. And I figure if it's just a bunch of short stories, if I'm tonally inconsistent or visually inconsistent from story to story, that's okay, as long as it's right for the story it's in. And then along the way, hopefully by the end of the book, I'll find whatever method works best for me. And so, like, honestly, going through book one page by page, it's ridiculous how varied it is in terms of approach, just because I wanted to see what I liked best. So it's like, this was pen and ink for the lettering and the first story. And then this page is fully digital. But then the one next to it is pen and ink and then scanned and then digitally painted over. Then this is acrylic paint, this one digital, this one inked in Photoshop, colored in Photoshop. This one inked and colored in Photoshop. This one inked in Illustrator, colored in Photoshop. This one inked by hand on paper with ink, also with ink. So like I just kept changing it up. Watercolor and acrylic, and then digital painting on top.
That's especially that first story. Like the others, I could tell you were experimenting different mediums throughout the pages, but that first story, I didn't know it was that you had a completely different medium almost every single page. That's incredible.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it makes yeah, I don't know if I might have gotten a little too loose with it by the third story, because my logic for the first two was, as long as the color palette is consistent, it'll still feel cohesive. But by that third story, I kind of threw everything out the window and just, like I said earlier, did whatever felt right when I was working on it at 3 a.m.
It still feels pretty cohesive. You're talking about Theo Portal?
Yeah, Theo Portal.
And Helga Hale's kind of transformation and blossoming. It still feels, I think it still feels tonally the same. And you seem to have two major complementary colors that are kind of duking it out and balancing. I mean, which is kind of the whole lion unicorn thing, is that, like,
I'm so glad you pick up on all this.
The struggle of the polarities. Well, that's like this universal mystical energy, man.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but it's like, I feel like a lot of people, they're just like, why is there a lion and a unicorn, and why is it green, and why is the other one pink, and like they just don't. I don't know. They take it more at face value rather than trying to find the symbolism behind it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think the lion and unicorn are, or what they represent, if you're comfortable.
Oh yeah, 100%. So when my reading through it, so I'm interested to hear your interpretation, because my interpretation normally, I'm a nerd when it comes to like esoteric academia. So I really heavily lean on like traditional tarot symbology, and like especially in correlation with Kabbalah and crap like that. Okay, I'm getting nerdy, but anyway.
Oh no, go for it.
The lion to me is like, I usually take the symbolism from the tarot card, specifically the card strength, which is like number 8, I think. So that's really all about like the primal nature of man, or humankind. So like your base instincts and whatnot, and the fight, the struggle in that card is like learning to control those instincts, that primal nature, not like defeating it and like destroying it necessarily. And so I always kind of just naturally associated the lion with that. And then the unicorn for me, and the color schemes are really interesting, and I don't really know what to make of the color schemes, but I got the dualistic nature and the way that you were using them. But the unicorn to me is just like imagination, like that sort of like etheric aspect of existence. And so for me, when the lion defeated the unicorn, she comes out this like huge buff, like Wonder Woman sort of thing. So it was like, I was wondering if what was happening was that maybe that there was like a choice, that maybe, you know, she would have come out different if the unicorn had defeated the lion in some way, and she comes out like this buff Amazon. But at the same time, her, like you mentioned, her hair color changes to that of the unicorn. So I guess she carried some sort of aspect of that. And maybe I'm like reading way too much into any of this, but it's what I do.
Oh, I love it.
How am I close?
Well, see, you know, you're not, but that's more my fault than yours, because you're actually coming from it from the correct way based on, you know, things you've read and seen before. And like mine was stuff that just felt right late at night.
Yeah.
And so it's very, you know, that's not going to make sense to anybody else, I don't think. And the things I picked were kind of atypical. You mentioned the strength card, and that was intentional. You probably noticed there was a panel that is flat out ripping off the strength panel.
Yep.
In the book. Hold it up here. Oh, you got it too. Okay, cool.
Yep.
There it is. Yeah.
Yep.
So you saw that, and then you see the one opposite of it with the unicorn.
Yep.
Yeah. You know what that one was? You recognize that one?
Geez, the death card.
Yeah. Death card.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like to me, the unicorn was death. And,
oh my God, I did not catch that. Holy shit. Well,
yeah, but I mean, that's no one associates a unicorn with death, let alone a pink unicorn. So, you know, it's
but I mean, it's all over the place. I mean, I should have caught that. I mean, that's the thing about symbolism, right? That's what you learn when you like train in esoteric traditions. It's not about like what's on the surface. It's always about what's behind it. That's the whole point of the symbol. So yeah, I should have totally caught that.
No.
That's brilliant.
I'm amazed you even looked into it as much as you did. I think that already makes you a little closer to understanding what I was trying to do in my weird insomniac phases of work. But also earlier, it says rose gold unicorn single malt Scotch. Mm-hmm. And it has a pink unicorn on the label, and it says aged 13 years. And, you know, the death card is number
13. Oh my God. That's awesome. Holy shit.
Part of the inspiration for that story, it's a loose retelling of a Russian fairy tale, Vasilisa the Beautiful, but that was just the structure of it. The meaning, you know, dealing with mortality and what I thought of as like a living death and wasting your life. A big reason why I had that was I read some interview online with Ashley Wood, an artist. You know, you asked earlier about influences. Ashley Wood was huge for me, and reading some interview with him, and he said that he was self-publishing magazines in his like early 20s and stuff. And I'm sitting there like reading this in a store and like in a comic book store, and oh God, how old was I? I was probably like 26 at the time. And I thought, oh no, I don't have anything out yet. And I got really insecure about like my own productivity. And so I promised myself like, okay, by the time I'm 30, I'm going to have a book out, whatever it is. I'm going to have my first comic out before I'm 30. And so I got started on Dishoom right away. And then someone approached me for paying a coloring job for another book, and it ended up taking 2 years. So this book went on hold, and it didn't come out till I was 34. But that's more my fault and mismanagement of time. But you know, I got a few books under my belt, so things are feeling a little better. But yeah, so like for me, that, you know, Dishoom, none of the stories ever will overtly tell you what year it is. I wanted to avoid that, but it'll use these loose terms like 7 years ago and 23 years ago and blah, blah, blah. And so if you like do all the math, you realize Helga's 30. And up until 30, she'd basically wasted her life. And this is her finally doing something about it. That's the way I saw it in my head. That's awesome. So the unicorn was like living death, where you're just wasting your life away instead of doing anything proactive. And the lion, that inner strength finally getting a chance to manifest.
It's fucking awesome.
Oh, thanks.
Bravo, sir. Bravo. Holy shit. If that's not making everybody rushing out and buying your books right now, then I don't know
Hope
what.
so.
Well, so if I really hope that maybe you have a campaign someday, like a major giant Kickstarter when you do like a giant Dishoom collection someday, and some of the tiers are a Chandra action figure and 7/7 action figure, because my God, I love the designs. I love the design so much. And I love how you're building your own mythology here between the sun and the moon, and the way that the moon is chasing after the sun. I'm giving away spoilers, I guess.
Yeah, go ahead. No, seriously, go ahead. You already gave the warning, right? So go
yeah.
for it.
But you know, one aspect that I really feel like is missing from comics, and especially a lot of, and I'm not bashing anybody out there, anybody I've touted on this channel, I love their stuff, right? But it's really hard for me to find comics that really lean well on storytelling. And man, you got it.
Thanks.
You got
I
it
feel
hardcore.
there's so many aspects to storytelling, and as a comic creator, you know all about like how much goes into it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, keep talking.
I feel like for me, like one of the most important parts of it is mood and atmosphere. For me, that's always what hits the most. And that's something that I remember, like, being younger, and I would read a lot as a kid. And it wasn't just the reading. I would, get like a fantasy book or a sci-fi book, and they would have those oil painting covers. And I remember, like, I'm really nearsighted. I'm wearing contacts right now, but like I remember being maybe 6 or 7 years old and like taking my glasses off and just getting like an inch away from this book cover of all these aliens running on the surface of the moon, guns out, and like just like staring at it and trying to get as close as possible as I physically could, thinking like, oh, I want to be in that world, like just like visit it once, and even though that would be terrifying, aliens with guns, but it's what I wanted to do. And
yeah.
and so
I'm with you.
I feel like I probably lean on that more than even other important aspects of storytelling, like plot. Because like you mentioned the Yule Crew, and like without spoiling anything, the second story in the second book, it's a silly and immersive story, and it builds off of Norse mythology and some other things, but in terms of plot, nothing really happens. It's like 7 pages of nothing. And again, without giving anything away, the last story in book 2 is Diamonds and Disappointment.
Yep.
And you shared that page with the sun and moon, and that's this 2-page spread, and it looks really epic and mythic. And there are more pages devoted to someone drinking tea in a cafe.
That's true. Yeah.
And I don't know why that is. It's just, that's what felt right at the time. And I thought, I wanted to see like if I could create that feeling, my wife and I, we went to Cape May in New Jersey, and like September 2020. And we went in this cafe, and it was just like this really nice time. My wife doesn't drink coffee, so she had a chai latte. And, I just thought, like, how do I recreate that feeling on the page? It's that nice, cozy, warm, so it has like a warm color palette to it. Orange is the dominant color when you are introduced to that cafe. And it's just little things like that, like just making you feel that feeling, and it's all kind of ironic because Dishoom is like an onomatopoeia from Bollywood movies, like the equivalent of like Adam West's, Batman with the bang and pow. And so like the title implies action, and there's some action in it, but it ironically doesn't really lean on that too much. It's more about atmosphere, if anything.
Have you ever watched the Power Comics channel at all?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
I'll send it to you. It's spearheaded by Evan Husney, and Ben Mara, Ben Mara. So he's been on it quite a bit as like a celebrity guest.
Nice.
And it's a very specific vein of comics. It's kind of like in the outlaw vein, but it's way more like they lean more on the like dollar bin amateur stuff that maybe only had like 5 copies in its print run kind of stuff, like really weird, rare stuff.
Right.
And Ben Morrow was talking one time about the type of comics he really likes in one of the episodes, and was even saying, kind of alluding to what you were talking about, where he actually it doesn't get excited by a lot of action in comics. He wants to see like people just sitting around having coffee, having conversation. He wants to see these, like, especially when they're like really interesting, fantastical people. He just wants to see them in like in the regular environment. And that kind of harkened into why I even liked, like, I started collecting during the Claremont X-Men days back in the late 80s, early 90s. And that was one of the things I really liked, were scenes where they were just hanging out and doing shit. Like so I love that stuff about your books. And if you don't mind, I'm going to talk about storytelling a little bit.
Sure.
As a, I went to school. I have a master's in liberal arts, huge emphasis on literature, for that, as well as, being a published author. Plot is like way overrated. And there's way too many publishing houses that try to focus so specifically on plot. And a lot of people critique movies, books, and stories based upon, plot holes and stuff. And it's like, anybody really, actually, even if you're not a good storyteller, can construct a plot, because there is almost a scientific method to it. It's easy to do, but can you create a mood? Can you create an atmosphere? Can you have someone walk away going, oh, this just stuck with me? I don't know what it was. It may not have even made sense in certain places, but it stuck with me. Right. That's like real story. Because I mean, like, look at the original stories. Like, look at the myths. The myths aren't plot heavy.
That's true. Yeah, and they do have a lot of nonsense because of the symbolism, where they're not always meant to be taken literally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just stuff that just evokes things inside of you, and and not just the way you tell a story, but the way your art dishumes. Your art does dishume. It does pop, even if it's just people sitting around, because it's bright, it's texturized. It's just so fucking fun to look at. My God. All right,
thanks.
I'll stop. Anyway, that's my point of view of story. I do try to have somewhat of a plot, but also I don't. I have had some people beta read, like, especially my new comic series I'm working on, because it's way more plot driven compared to some of my other stuff. Mm-hmm. But some of the people that have beta read it, and they like come back with like, yeah, but what about this and that? And I'm like, okay, I'm not worried about that piece, So yeah, I mean, I think you've got a winning formula, man. What does the Dishoom future look like for you? Is it just a random thing whenever you're creating, or do you want to have a?
Oh no, there's a loose direction. So like, I have a whole list of stories that need to get told, and the plot lines are outlined, but the way that plot is going to be told is going to change based on whatever is happening in my life at that time. So
yeah,
like, that's why the pink hair happened with Helga, and so like those kinds of things are going to be inevitable. So I can't tell you exactly what the next book is, even though I know exactly which stories are going in the next book.
Right.
How the next book is going to feel or come across, I don't know yet, because I'm not there. But yeah, I imagine it optimistically if I could get 10 issues, but there were 2 years between 1 and 2, so we'll see how it goes.
So, do you mind do you work fairly slow, or is it, you did a lot of other projects? I mean, I haven't even touched on
Ghost Agents, Rocco Jerrome's Ghost Agents.
One of the best fucking covers of all time, man. Holy shit.
Thanks so much.
You're doing a bunch of stuff in the kayfabe community. So is it because you're doing all these extra projects?
well, so I work full time, have family obligations,
Yep.
and
Same here.
and also like people have been coming to me like Rocco, and it's really hard for me to say no to a cover job. I love doing them because my my day job is in graphic design, and so the idea of doing a comic book cover and maybe a logo for somebody's book is always enticing to me. And so I've been saying yes to a lot. And not all of it's out yet, but there's someone, Brandon Hayes is publishing a book called Thready through 100% Comics with William Hoffnecht. And he varies the logo from book to book. I did one of his logos, and I did one of his covers, but that one's not out yet. It's done, but I'm not sure when it's going to be released. And then I did the cover for that. You were in Weapon Ek as well. And I was fortunate enough to do the cover for that one as well, thanks to William Hoffnecht and Ben Granoff. And that was really big for me because that directly led to other work for me. When people saw that, it put me on their radar. And I have something coming up with James Windsor Smith. I'm doing a cover and logo for him. I did a logo for Ben Granoff. So yeah, I've been busy. You mentioned Comic Lounge earlier, and Eli was on recently, and they mentioned that Dishoom 2 was sent to the printer, and Ryan was like, finally, and part of me was like, oh man, like I gotta get these things out faster, but part of me was also really proud, like, you know what, book 1 took me 7 years to put out, and book 2 took 2 years, and it's 8 pages longer than the first one. So I did all those other comics in between, so I'm pretty happy with it. It's a personal best, 2 years between books.
Man, that last conversation I just had, the last session with Ben, we had a convo about, like, do we really need to have an industry where people are just pumping out a book a month? You know, for someone like you, I'll wait 2 years. I don't care. This is amazing stuff. It's just like waiting for a book from like your favorite author or whatever. Like, why do we have to expect this monthly schedule? I want a person to take their time. And then also you're producing all this other work in the same time. So your name is out there, and that's take your time. Take your time with Dishoom.
I'm hoping to, but
we will wait.
The problem is, like, I wish I could work fast enough to keep up with what I have planned. That's the problem, because I have another non-Dishoom project in the works that's 35 pages deep that I'm really excited to get out there. But, you know, I need that time to finish it up the way I want it to be.
And here I was going to ask you, regarding like commissions and stuff after this call, but we'll have to have a conversation.
I'm not gonna, you know, I'm open to it, but I do say no a lot. Especially like people, a lot of people have offered me coloring jobs, and with very little exception, I've said no. And you know, it's an unfortunate thing because, like, I really like the process of coloring. I enjoy it, but you know, there's so many reasons to say no. Like colorists and letterers are never going to really get the shine they deserve given the craft behind what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's one reason, an ego-driven reason to say no. And the other is just a practical one where I work too slow with the coloring to really make it worthwhile financially. Like, the price would have to be way above what people are willing to pay for coloring if I was going to agree to it, because I, you know, the hours I put into it, I would need to see the money that reflects that.
Yeah. I wonder how much colorists get paid, like industry on the industry scale. That's the biggest thing I learned when I finally dove in and started, you know, making comics 3 years ago, is the lettering and the coloring processes. I respect far more now. Like, when I'm looking at a comic, I never pass up the letter or colorist anymore. Like, because I find both jobs grueling, difficult. Not that I hate them, but my God, it just, it's a place of learning for me for sure. And the fact that you can even produce what you can produce is pretty stunning. I mean, yeah, of course it would take time.
Right. Yeah. I think colorists and letterers are really the unsung heroes of that comic book workflow, that traditional comic book workflow. You just look at like the demand of it. Like if you look at older comics where it's a very limited palette and flat colors that are going to be printed on top of thick, solid black lines, that's less demanding than what they're doing now. I mean, now they're even like screening color on top of the inks and adding all these glow effects, and like there's so much more work involved. I don't know. I just don't think it's worth it. And another reason is one of expectations from the other people, because I think people when they look at my my solo work, that like in things like Dishoom, a lot of times I would say like 90% of it, it's not penciled, inked, and colored. It's just a mixed media approach. Sometimes they, I actually have, I have a binder for each book of just the artwork and stuff. A lot of, because I draw on scraps of paper and envelopes, and there's all kinds of things. And so like the front cover for Dishoom 2, it's on copier paper with Crayola colored pencils, and then there's tracing paper taped to it, and then there's Tombow markers on top of that. And then as was all this stuff, and I don't even have a scanner. I had a scanner in 2020 and I broke it accidentally, trying to clean it. I got it wet and it turned on, and now it's dead. And so I haven't had a scanner, so I photograph it and then I finish it up in Photoshop. And so like people, they see the finished product and they're like, wow, he's got a great color sense. I want him to color my book. And then they'll give me inks that have all the lighting information already on it. And, it's a really tightly worked piece. And so then like it gets back to them looking like a traditionally colored comic. And they're like, well, why doesn't this look like that mixed media stuff he does? And it's like, I would have to use your artwork as a layout and redo the whole thing.
Right.
And that really isn't worth it. So there's just not enough time in the day, unfortunately.
It's another interesting thing you say that, because that's one thing I learned for myself with colors. If I'm going to use, and even in my current book, I'm just doing ink wash. But
nice.
But what I've learned, whether coloring or even doing my current process, is I'm not doing as much shading. Like you said, I'm not pointing out where the light source is so much in the drawing and when I ink it out, so I can put more of that into the ink wash or the color and whatnot, and it's let the texture kind of pull some of that out.
Right.
And I wish I would have, well, it's just a learning process. My earlier work, I didn't understand. So that's interesting that you say that. I love the mixed media approach. That's cool.
Oh, thanks. And I mentioned Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller, earlier, and like, that's a great example of what we're talking about here, where the colorist will determine things like light source, and like, what Lynn Varley does in that book is incredible. And it's, just as much time and effort as any other aspect of creating a book like that. And, there's that one panel where Miller just did a outline of a rectangle for the panel, and then she painted an explosion in there.
Yep.
And, and if I'm going to do like ink and then color that ink, that's what it's like. There's a page in Dishoom where that's very much the case, where the line art on this panel is really, really nothing. This one here, where Helga and Sven Seven are in this room and they're seeing the Theo portal, like the reflective floor and all that stuff. The line art is bare bones. There's nothing there. It looks like a coloring book. So all of that is there in the coloring, but it's like, is that really coloring, or are you doing like a full painting under the line art?
It looks like the only place you filled in any blacks at all were just the background and then 7-7.
Sven Seven, yeah, and then there's just a little bit of heavy black shadow on the staircase there, but it's like very, very minimal.
Oh yeah,
very minimal.
Love it. Am I pronouncing his name correctly? Is it Sven Seven? Okay.
I'm not really the authority on.
You
on
are.
Names.
You're
I mean, on Nordic names and stuff, like Helga. Oh, so like early, this is something I actually never told anybody other than my wife and a couple of close friends. But, I had mentioned earlier, like just what is around me is going to dictate what goes into the books. And the name Helga Hale, it was this weird thing where like I had Helga as her name as a placeholder for years. And I was like, I'm definitely changing this later, And then I somehow stumbled onto this article about Andrew Wyatt's long lost Helga paintings. And then I thought, well, that's kind of weird that showed up now. And then I, didn't think much of it. And then I went to work. And at the time I was working at a gas station in New Jersey. And in the parking lot, I found a lost credit card and I picked it up and the name on it was Helga. And you're like, okay, like that's 2 in one day.
Yeah.
Like that's just bizarre. So like that name's sticking now. I'm never changing that name.
Yeah, that you got to follow that synchronicity, man.
Right.
Something's telling you something.
Right. I don't know what I'm being told, but there it is.
That's fucking kick-ass. Let's switch gears a tad, if you don't mind, unless there's anything else you wanted to touch on anything we've been talking about.
You kept mentioning Jonder's design, and I want to segue into it because there is a cool story that I think you especially would appreciate behind that design.
Please do, because if I ever had to, like, if I might even just go the route of commissioning someone like Punker Mike or someone to make this toy with your blessing and your permission, because I love Chandra's design so much. It is, when I see it, I'm 8 years old again, and I want to play with that action figures.
Oh my God. Thanks so much. That means a lot to me because you mentioned Masters of the Universe earlier. And like, when I started with this name and this logo and all of this stuff, actively seeking out illustration work, the impossible dream job I thought that I had in mind, one day maybe I can achieve this, is I wanted to do the packaging painted artwork for a toy line like He-Man, like that 80s fantasy, ridiculous, loud colors, crazy settings.
Hell yes.
Robots, giant animals, all of it. And so that was this impossible goal that I'd set for myself. And then I mentioned earlier that I got hired to do a coloring job for a comic. And that comic was created and written by Walter Harris, who does custom toys. And he had a line that was inspired by Masters of the Universe, and it was Hammer of the Gods toys. And he commissioned this really talented artist, Alan J. Shell, to do the pencils and inks for the book for this character. And the lead, was basically what if Carl Weathers was the lead in a B-movie 80s fantasy in the style of like Conan the Barbarian or something derivative of that. And so it's basically Carl Weathers with a giant metal fist. And so Walter imagined this book being sorry, this is like 30 tangents, but I'm going to go with it. So I don't even know where we started, but
who cares at this point?
Who cares, right? And Walter, what he had in mind was he wanted the comic to look like it was composed of stills from a Filmation style He-Man type cartoon. Like if you took still images from the show and then like pasted them together and put the dialogue balloons in. And Alan J. Shell did the pencils and inks, and he perfectly got that style. He has such a clean, I think he worked 100% digitally. He has such a clean style to it where he can mimic pretty much any different cartoon style you ask of him. And he did this book, and I had to go in and do the flat colors so it looked like Filmation animation, and then I also had to do the painted backgrounds. And then when that project wrapped, I got to live out that dream and do the toy packaging. I got to do that painted background, I got to do the logo, I got to do all of it. And I have the actual figure in the box, but it's at the office, and I haven't been at the office since 2020.
Oh my God.
Hopefully it's still there.
Wow.
I never brought it home. And
is there a way to find this online at all? Is there anything?
Look up, if you search Walter Harris and Hammer of the Gods toys, HOTG toys, I think is his Instagram, and definitely look up Alan J. Shell, ALANJSCHELL.
Okay.
Really talented artist. But yeah, those are the guys I collaborate. What was the question? How did we get on this? You asked me something specific that had nothing to do with this.
Chandra's design.
Oh yeah. I don't know how I got there, but
Oh, just like the
yeah.
influence and everything. I'm with you. This is all
Okay.
connecting for me, man. You're in my jam right now. I'm on cloud nine. You just keep going.
Okay. All right. Well, so anyways, the design for Chandra, which has nothing to do with that project. That's why I don't know how I got here. Um, I lived in rural Pennsylvania for a while, and while I was there, I was really excited to talk to you about all this stuff. I had a lot of weird paranormal, supernatural things happen only in the 3 years that I lived in rural Pennsylvania. I moved around a bunch. I was in upstate New York. I was in South Florida. I was in New Jersey. I was in New York City. And I'm in Queens now. And like, I've never had anything strange happen yet. 3 years in Pennsylvania is just thing after thing after thing. And one of those things was I was in bed late one night, and I'm a very heavy sleeper. You can have all the lights on, you can have the TV on, it doesn't matter. I'm out. And some reason, with all the lights out, there was just this bright light coming in through the window that was disturbing me, which never happens. No light disturbs me when I'm trying to sleep. And I'm just thinking, like, what is that light? Like, why is this, like, why are my blinds positioned just right that this street light is coming in here? Because it was rural Pennsylvania, and rural enough that there were only 2 traffic lights in that town. Like, everything was shut down by 6. Like, there shouldn't be any light pollution whatsoever. And so I peek through the blinds to see what's going on. And it's the full moon shining through the cracks and the blinds and on my face. And somehow that was enough to bother me. And I saw that and thought, wow, I never saw the moon so big or so bright. And then I turned around to go back to bed. And for a split second, in full form, there was Chandra for just a second. He was standing in my living room. I was sleeping in the living room at the time. And he was there, and then he was gone. And so, like, I can't really even get credit for that design. It's something I saw. It was there, and like, I just knew that whatever that was my I guess my subconscious's way of processing what the moon is.
That's incredible. I just love it even more. Oh my God. That's so awesome. Yeah, I think that a lot of the I kind of ascribe to the Alan Moore school of imagination, and Grant Morrison, and I'm sure other cartoonists feel this way, and just creators in general. I do really feel like that when we channel creativity and we channel through that imaginative source, I mean, that these are the beings and gods and things of old, of the past, and we're just, and whether they're aspects of our subconscious, I think they're more kind of, I'm very tuned to Carl Jung's work. So I do think that there is a collective consciousness across the planet. And I think that, when you're tapping into that, yes, yeah, I think you're tapping into something that is on a collective level, but only you could have like channeled that image in the way that it appeared to you, because it's also a subjective process as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's something I think about a lot, like the idea of a collective unconscious, or like, I feel a little uncomfortable in trying to say definitively what these kinds of experiences are, what's exactly happening. Like, based on what I've seen and experienced, all I can say definitively is I, at this time, don't know what happened. But I do think, like, have you read a lot of John Keel?
Yes, I do. I was just talking about John Keel the other day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, John Keel, and we'll get to like my red person thing. We'll get into that, but John Keel was a major influence and continues to be. And please, people, don't go watch the movie Mothman Prophecies. The book is a vastly different experience.
I would say read the book and watch the movie. But,
okay.
But take each as its own thing.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, to even call it an adaptation of that book is ludicrous
Yeah.
because it's not.
Yeah.
But I feel like thematically, it did reflect a lot of what Keel was trying to convey.
Sure.
But yeah, like
were you getting to the space of tulpas and things like that? Is that where you were heading, or
I
you brought up
wasn't,
Keel?
but I wasn't, but we can go there. So like in the Mothman prophecies, actually, I think that's where I first read about this thing. So like you mentioned Eli Schwab and Ringside Thology earlier, and on one of those nights they did this thing where it was the theme was pulp characters and image characters, and so people were doing there it is. Oh, cool. You have it handy. I thought maybe since you changed rooms, it wouldn't be there.
I had to
so
it with me. This is one of my prized possessions, by the way.
Oh, thanks so much. I'm so glad it found a good home. So Eli came up with the idea to pair Spawn and the Shadow in his piece, and I completely just stole his idea and did the same two characters. And so like I did two envelopes. This is the opposite one with Spawn, and so they face each other. One with a red background, one with a green background. And anyway, so like I was first introduced to this idea in Keel's Mothman Prophecies, where he talks about Walter B. Gibson, the author who didn't exactly create the Shadow, but probably is the most involved in developing the character.
Mm-hmm.
And like he was at a point where he wrote like 2 full-length Shadow novels in a month, which I can't imagine what they read like, but he did it.
Yeah.
And so there's this is such a weird thing because it jumps all over the timeline, and I don't even know the best way. Like going chronologically probably isn't the best way to tell it, but there was a book that that talked about supposedly true ghosts in New York City, and I'm blanking on the title, but they had what was called the Ghost of Gay Street. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so 12 Gay Street is this address in New York City, and people, at one point this address was a speakeasy, and like all these prominent New Yorkers throughout history have lived at this address at different points in time, and people kept seeing this ghostly figure who was wearing formal attire, all black, with a long cape and a wide hat, and they, one witness specifically said that his face looked as though it blended with the shadows. And now the thing is, Walter B. Gibson lived at 12 Gay Street at one point in time. And the book that was telling this ghost story about the Gay Street ghost made no mention of Gibson, because like they didn't have the same access to information whenever that book was written. That author likely didn't know Gibson ever lived there, and nor did the person who saw the ghost. And yet the description is very, very similar to the Shadow, if not exact.
Fucking awesome.
And so God. Keel in the Mothman Prophecies, Keel talks about it as like a potential tulpa. And Gibson himself, he was a magician, not in the Alan Moore sense, but like David Copperfield,
right?
Magician, like a performing magician, and like he was into all this weird stuff, and like he believed in ESP and believed in like the powers of the mind, and felt that time isn't as we experience it in a linear way, and he had all these wacky ideas. And so the idea of this guy with that kind of mindset, with this kind of resume, where he created this shadow character, pulp character, and wrote those novels at that address. Like there are stories of him like writing so much at the typewriter to the point where his fingers bled. So like, there's so much creative energy going in there, and maybe there's some residue. We don't know for sure, but it's the ghost of a being that never existed in tangible physical reality. So I guess it's like a tulpa of something.
That's me. It's like he was channeling or something, or my God, that's incredible. That just, I've already resonated with the Shadow hardcore, but I never knew that. And that blows my mind. I didn't catch that aspect in Keel's work. I'm going to have to go back and read it.
It's a brief paragraph in the Mothman Prophecies, I think. It could be another one of his books, but I'm pretty sure it's the Mothman Prophecies that mentioned it. But yeah, it was such a weird rabbit hole to fall into.
It's incredible. That has nobody else put this together, or did you put that together?
Oh, no, 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 no. Other people have definitely put this together. I've
Mhm.
read articles about it. I heard podcasts about it too. Because like when I sent you that envelope, I wrote a note with it, loosely explaining, but
Yeah,
I was writing that from memory, and I realized I got all the facts wrong. And so I did a little research. It's like, I'm talking to Daniel. I better get it right, uh, and uh, and tell him the real story, which is so much cooler than what I originally told you.
it's amazing that if you don't mind, I'm going to segue this like right into the red person thing
Okay, go for it.
because I feel like it's kind of in the same vein because there's this like weird um, mesh between imagination and reality, and how manifest and real can this like fictional stuff like really come into being? And are we just tapping into something that's already happening, or are we a part of like the creation of it? So I'm like thinking of Walter B. Gibson just
Yeah.
away. But so back in college I had a dream of, and this is when I started getting into magic and stuff like that, and all the stuff Alan Moore was talking about in his stuff, and trying to be a little miniature John Constantine. I I had a dream about there was like this terrorist attack or something at this hospital that I happened to be at,
Oh wow.
and these beings that were dressed completely in red suits came and rescued me and were trying to recruit me into this like cabal organization that they had. And they were very much like the Men in Black phenomenon, but they were dressed in red, and they were very much about where the Men in Black are always trying to get you to forget supernatural phenomenon, UFOs, things like that. The beings in red were more like they were supporters of this supernatural phenomenon, and were trying to get society to not be mundane, right? Like to not sit there and like, oh, that's a weird thing that happened and we're going to forget that happened. Like they're there to try to promote the weird in all ways possible. And so it stuck with me for quite a few years. And then when I got to the point where like you did, where I was at a certain point in my life and I was like, I'm a creative person and I haven't really produced any content. I need to write a fucking book or something.
Right.
And so I wrote my novel Red Mask, which is about these beings, these people that are like, I call them shamanic revolutionaries, and they're dressed in red, and they're very much what I call like John Keel talks about this a little bit, and so this is like in the Tulpa vein, but I call them like daimonic beings, and like in the sense of like the word daimon comes from the Greek, and it like daimonic entities were entities that bridged the world of the real and the unreal. They were beings that were a medium point between the supernatural and the mundane. And so like um, Plato had a like an imaginary being, or like an imaginary ally, what he called a daimonic being that helped like provide some of the wisdom for him that he imparted to others. Um, Napoleon actually had this interaction with a figure in a red coat,
Oh
actually.
wow.
Um, and so there's all these like weird occurrences and myths surrounding people in red that are just like in stories, I guess. And I did some research, but not like a ton. And I noticed, but that it was associated a lot with like the fairy realm and in folklore and stuff, like beings that would be dressed in red that would appear. So I concocted this story. It's a fun, crazy. It's almost like a superhero-ish adventure, and they're like they're basically like tripping LSD style the whole time, and that's how they get their powers. And it's
Nice.
a fun thing. But what I found out later is and as everybody knows who watches this channel, I got involved in indigenous practices and got involved and did some training in that arena. And one of the elders that I worked with read my book and was like, so you've encountered these people, right? And I was like, what are you talking about encountering these people? That sounds crazy. And he talked about a case in which he encountered these beings that were dressed and red in the Andes of Peru, like in the middle of the mountains. And they had almost supernatural like powers. And I'm just like, what? And he pointed me to a book called The Secret of the Andes that even refers to this group as the Order of the Red Hand.
Oh, that's such a cool name.
Yeah. And well, that's the name that I refer to them as.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, what? So I'm kind of like mind blown and thinking this is I don't know how to handle this. I mean, I like esoteric stuff, but I'm not a person that wants to be like, ooh, a ghost. Ooh, it's definitely a ghost. It is a dead thing of a woman who, a dead bride, whatever. I still try to keep a very skeptic mind and keep like both feet planted on the ground. So a couple of months ago, and I'm sorry this is long, and we're going to get to like you in a second here, because a couple of months ago, I was on the Higher Side Chats podcast, which was a bucket list item for me. That was fucking cool.
Congrats.
But it got brought up, this like red person in red thing. And man, you and numerous other people contacted me saying that they have had experiences with people in red.
Yes.
And you even sent me a picture. Well, I'll display the image that you drew.
Oh, good. I'm glad you can edit that.
Yeah, I'll edit that in because and the fact too that I'm really connected to my comics community right now, and like the fact that you had a similar type of experience. I feel like this all seems really surreal to me, Sam. I feel like I'm in some kind of weird waking dream. So I'd like to hear about your experience, because I think you told me that this was during that Philadelphia timeframe for you.
Central Pennsylvania. Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So if you don't mind sharing, and then also, for posterity's sake, I'm thinking about writing a nonfiction investigative book on this shit, because I've had enough people churn up that have had experiences that I might as well like document this. I don't know what it is. But anyway,
that would be amazing for you to compile. I'd love to check that out. Especially like how many people got in touch with you after Higher Side Chats?
Okay, so I say a ton, but five people, but still
that's pretty impressive though.
Yeah, it's freaking me out. It's enough that's making me go like, what? I don't think I had any kind of conscious experience. I just had a dream, and they've just really stuck with me. I'm even incorporating them into my latest comic. I've like shoo-inned these people in red in, because they're in my imaginative world. They're just always there in the background. And so it just felt right to, anyway. You have the floor.
Interesting. It's really interesting that you said they were just there in the background, because that's my experience with them. While I was in rural Pennsylvania, I saw a lot of weird things, usually in my living room and usually at nighttime. But the exception to that were these red beings, and they would be visible during the daytime when the sun was out and outdoors. And if I was like in any foresty park type place, if I just went out to look at like this little pond or something, every now and then out of my peripheral vision, I would see a figure who looked as though he was made out of like a textured red canvas material. He was wearing a hood, a cape, and like his skin, all of it would be the same shade of red and the same texture. And I'd be like, well, what is that? And I'd turn to get a better look, and they wouldn't just disappear the way that Chandra did in my living room. They would kind of step aside like they were hiding behind a tree, only there was no tree for them to hide behind. And they just stepped aside into nothing, and they'd be gone. And this was a recurring thing. And again, only happened in rural Pennsylvania. And, if these things continued happening around me, I would just think I was crazy, and I wouldn't tell any of you about any of this. But because they all happened in a 3-year window in one place, I think something else was happening, and it probably wasn't, thankfully, my mental health. But yeah, that was my experience. And so like when I was listening to that podcast, you started talking about the red people, and it just like blew my mind. And before we started recording, you mentioned like people would would approach you and ask to be on this show to promote whatever book they wanted or whatever. And that wasn't my intention, but I was hoping that when I told you the story, maybe you'd invite me. And so I got my wish. I was like, I'm not going to ask him. That would be presumptuous. But, if he invites me, that's a different story.
Dude, I would have talked with you anyway, man. This is like, I feel like I have a celebrity on. So, I mean, this is an honor for me.
Likewise, it's definitely mutual. I've been listening to a bunch of episodes of your show and watching a lot of it. I saw the Ben Granoff one, Rick Lopez, Eli Schwab, a lot of them. It's all good stuff.
Thank you. So what do you feel that the purpose of these, what do you feel the purpose of the Order of the Red Hand in your life? Like, I mean, there were definitely that it kind of fits in with the same vein of my mythos of them, of when there's a lot of supernatural phenomenon, they're around, and they're present, but they're not like in the shit. They're on the periphery, which is the kind of fits in the same category of a daimonic being.
Yeah. I can't, my experience was so brief. Like I would just get a glimpse and then they're gone. I didn't interact. I didn't talk. But one thing is, like a lot of the other things that I had witnessed, you could get a sense of intent just by the general mood of the air around you. And some weren't so subtle. One of the beings I experienced in my living room strangled me for a bit. That's not one of the red beings, totally unrelated, but that was pretty clear. Like, hey, this is a not so nice guy. I never got that feeling of malevolence about these red people at all. It was just more or less neutral. They were just there. You mentioned the collective unconscious earlier, and again, this ties in with the genre design. I think this is where I meant to go like an hour ago.
We got all
like
night, man.
Like you said that they might be pulling from the witnesses' experiences or whatever. Like, I feel like whatever library of images I've got in my head, it's going to be a lot of Alex Ross paintings, Bruce Timm Batman cartoons, and things like that. And so when you have those things in mind, and whatever this is that presented itself, or whatever this is that my mind made up without me meaning to, I feel like it was pulling from those images. The red being that I saw looked and was dressed very similarly to something you might see Alex Ross might design for like his X-Men designs, where Cyclops has the hood up on his head. It was very much in that vein. Their means of costuming. And genre was very, I mean, I don't think anyone would look at it and not think of Batman, at least briefly. It's right there. Let me pull up the image here. So this is the moon god that I witnessed briefly in my living room. I should say in issue 2, it's revealed he has a metal right hand.
Yeah.
Spoilers. That was not something that I witnessed. That's something I added later. Full disclosure, he did not have a metal hand when I saw him.
And I'm all for his staff in the version of the Panther, because there's like 3 different versions. That's my vote. But I like that there's like different versions of the story and what they might be, and that's freaking awesome.
Well, thanks.
Well, that's really interesting. You think it was the area in Pennsylvania that you lived in? Do you think so? I have a personal belief that when like people are experiencing like a big chunk of supernatural phenomenon like that, which it seems to happen that way. I've rarely met someone where they're just always experiencing stuff all the time. Like it seems to happen in phases.
Yeah.
Did you have anything significant going on in your life where you were like going through this major transformation, whether it was like emotionally or spiritually or whatever?
Yeah, actually, I mean, like my wife
I mean,
was.
if you want to talk about it,
No, no, yeah, absolutely. Like we can. I mean, like I had like a weird job situation, and like I probably wasn't in the best place, like emotionally or mentally. Um, so like that's another thing. Like I said, I don't feel comfortable definitively saying what it was I experienced because I'm very open to, hey, maybe I was just really stressed out, and it only happened in Pennsylvania because I was stressed during that whole time I was there. And that could have just led to hallucinations or maybe there was something tied to that area that's outside of me that other people could have witnessed. Part of why I lean towards it being geography specific was when I first moved into that apartment. I was talking to some coworkers, and they told me that a week before I moved in, someone shot himself in the head on that street and survived. And
whoa.
yeah, and then there was I think another there was a suicide like a month prior to that. And so like there's some dark stuff going on in this area.
Mm,
Thankfully I'm not there anymore. But yeah, that's the only reason why I'm thinking maybe there's something just tied to that area for
mhm.
whatever reason. But who knows? Maybe, I hope there's no like next phase of it, like while I'm in New York, start seeing weird people in the shadows.
Yeah. Yeah, it might have just been a weird area. I mean, I do think that um, you're mentioned like maybe you were just stressed or crazy, and this is where people might think I'm crazy, but I feel like this phenomenon. So John Keel talks about this a little bit, and really the person I lean on from a scholarship angle is Patrick Harper, who's very well versed in the history of the imagination, and he's got many books about like soul and the soul realms and the daimonic reality that we're talking about. And these occurrences are uh, more often than not end up being real, but also they are subjective at the same time, which means they're not literal in the sense that they are strictly objective phenomenon, but that doesn't mean that the reality of what's happening isn't really there. That there is something going on, and but it can never plant itself fully in the mundane realm. This is why we can never get a clear picture of a ghost, or why we
Right.
can't quite capture that UFO on camera, or there's
Mm-hmm.
never a clear picture of Bigfoot, whatever. It's because this stuff is kind of always going in and out, and that it's almost like that same space that you're in whenever you're having a dream and you're pulled out of the dream into the waking, and there's that space in between.
Yeah.
It's like it's still very real for you, and there's people whose whole lives change just because of one dream they have. The impact of that is completely real.
I mean,
So
you had a dream and wrote a book, so you're one of them, right?
yeah, yeah. And and I treat instances. So I have many characters that I've worked on that are very similar to a Chandra like experience, and I treat that as like almost like a thing of reverence. They become, and I may be crazy, but they become personalities in my life, and they become beings that I have like a relationship and an interaction with. So I just add them to the palette of all of the personalities, I guess, that are in my brain or whatever. I don't have multiple personalities, but
Okay.
um, it's the same way I think that a lot of the ancients worked. When we look at mythologies and we look at all these pantheons of gods, they what's interesting is like before a lot of the monotheistic religions, these deities were more like very personable beings that you had relationships with. They interacted with humans a lot, and there was someone that you felt like if you think of the Vikings, you could walk the woods and you could run into Odin, right? In the Greek world, the gods frequently came and they interacted with humans and even slept with humans. I mean, whereas a lot of the monotheistic religions nowadays, we have these temples and this space between humans and the gods. You know, you can only get to it through the priests, but that wasn't so, you know, a long time ago. So I think that, yeah, very much more interactive. And I think what that is just an aspect of humanity that was just very interactive with the soul realm, the imaginal realm, and those daimonic presences just manifested through the collective consciousness in various ways. And now, like now we have, for people who are open to it, we have the shadow, we have the people in red, we have John Constantine, who Alan Moore and other writers of John Constantine said has manifested in real life.
Right.
And so I'm also open to the fact that I'm crazy, but I'm very open to the idea that this is a reality we're playing with. And like Chandra is just, you know, just as real a phenomenon. At least I hope so. I hope so, because I mean, I don't want anything ill coming towards you. So if it came during a bad time, but Chandra's fucking awesome.
Well, I mean, he's not really a malevolent force or anything in the book, and I didn't get that air of malevolency when I saw him in person. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned earlier, like in Keel's writing, I think, you know, yeah, another thing to consider is maybe these are things outside of us that don't have a physical form, so they borrow a costume from you know, the images we have stored in our head. And so that's why I'll see these people that more or less look like superheroes, and like someone else will see, you know, a gray alien or what have you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's, oh man, I'm gonna have to recommend some books to you if you're a heavy reader, because I would like to talk more thoroughly with you about this.
Patrick, what was the
Harpur? So Harpur. What was cool is I had a pretty nice conversation and relationship established with Rick Veitch in preparation for Wizard #2 in my interview. Mm-hmm. And he and I talked about this for hours. It was so fucking cool. He's so into this shit. He is so in it, which is why I felt like this huge camaraderie with him. But I mentioned this book from Patrick Harpur to him and even sent him a copy. And he put that book, he added it as like in his comic, in his latest edition of Rarebit Fiends. There's like a drawing of the book that I sent him. And I was just like, oh, wow, that really influenced him that much.
Wow.
But yeah, Harpur, I think he's a British scholar. And the main book I lean on all the time is Daimonic Reality, which anytime someone wants to have a conversation with me about the realm of the supernatural, I'm like, read this book first, please. Just read this book first, because Daimonic Reality, Daimonic. And I'm probably pronouncing daimonic wrong because I'm horrible with pronunciations.
Same here. Don't worry about it.
So he's written another book called The History of the Imagination. The other one is so he just leans so much on like folklore, myths, and other ideas like that, and he just ties everything together with this sort of John Keel investigative quality. And his emphasis is tapping down really overall his works, that what is soul, and the idea of soul, and soul being this thing that's not like, oh, I have a soul, I'm a human with a soul, but it is this imaginative logos that exists in interaction with us as humans. And it's where we get our ideas from, imagination, you know, which, you know, a lot of, you know, that goes back to the idea of tulpas. And the Buddhists kind of talk about this space where thoughts and ideas originally come from and not coming from us. I don't think it's that literal, but I do think that there's an interaction with fucking something, because even just the stuff that we've talked about in this interview is enough to really get me, or at least hopeful and wishful. But yeah, his stuff is great. I love it. My copy is so battered and has so many notes in it because I've gone through it so much. I'm just always referring to it. I haven't read, because most books on the supernatural are very like, ooh, or they're trying to ascribe something to it, or their own ideology, or they're trying to just, ghosts are the spirits of the past. Like he casts all of that stuff aside, and he's really trying to come at it from an academic angle as much as possible. And it's amazing. I'd be really interested to hear what you think about it.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out. I mean, that sounds up my alley, because it drives me nuts when, whether it's a believer or a skeptic, when they want to just put whatever it is in a nice, neat box. And I don't think you can. I think you just have to admit you don't know. Right?
Yeah.
No, that's all you can say definitively.
I think it's cooler that we don't know. I think it's cooler that it's a mystery. It seems really boring to try to classify these things.
Right. I mentioned like nothing supernatural has happened aside from that 3-year window in Pennsylvania. But in January of 2020, my wife and I were at her friend's kid's birthday party. And nothing supernatural happened here. I'll spoil that right now. So don't expect anything too big, but it was definitely really interesting. And I think you in particular will find it interesting. And I'm not super comfortable in social situations a lot. I need to recharge. I'm very introverted. So the idea of a party situation can be a little taxing on my system. And so like what happened was, maybe a few hours into the party, I needed a break, but I didn't want to just like step outside, and I needed an excuse, right? And so I remembered, oh, well, in the basement when we were all eating lunch, I saw there was like a coloring station set up for the kids, so I could go down there. And the kid has been talking about Batman all day. I can just draw him a picture of Batman, but in reality, I'm giving myself a break. And and so it's win-win, right? And so I go downstairs, and the family's nanny is down there. And I thought, oh, great, I don't have my my alone time that I really desperately wanted / needed. And so, but okay, well, I'll just help her clean up. She was, folding up chairs and putting some things away. And so, I joined her, and we were putting things away. And I'd never talked to this person before, never met her before. And she just completely unloads this whole thing about how she was staying with an elderly woman who needed care, and that on the night that she died, there were these 3 hooded figures in white cloaks that appeared, and they were arguing over the fate of her soul, and this whole thing. And there was like a white crab that was 4 feet wide and disappeared under the bed, and there was this whole thing. And like and I'm thinking like this came out of nowhere. We're folding chairs, we're putting them away, and like, it was just like, hey, how's it going? And then this, and like, like you, I'm thinking this is awesome. Like, I'm not even weird. Like, I think this is great. Like, I wasn't expecting to have this conversation today, but this is cool. And it was a good like 10 minutes where she's telling me about all these crazy experiences. And then when she's done, I'm like, don't get me wrong, I loved hearing it, but why did you just share all that with me? And she looks at me and she says, well, you have a light shadow. And I'm like, what does that mean? And he's like, well, people with a light shadow, I can see when someone else does. And so I knew I could talk to you about these things. And I'd never heard of that, never experienced anything like that before or since. But I just thought that was the weirdest thing.
She said you had a light shadow?
Yes. Have you ever heard that? I've never.
So a light shadow. So does she mean that in the spectrum of light, like a shadow of that spectrum? Or
I asked her to elaborate, and she just kept repeating the phrase light shadow. So I don't know. So like she had a thick West Indian accent, and so like maybe there was a language or some kind of barrier there, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know what was intended. And I tried Googling that phrase, but good luck looking up light shadow. You find all the stuff about photography.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but I'll look into that. I mean, I only know. So, okay, in the tradition that I was trained in, it's a Peruvian tradition, and there we use the term shadow or shade to represent a person's I guess like in Western terms, people would call it aura or whatever, but it's not really that. It's like the projection of consciousness that you have in the
Okay.
world. And we use the term sombra, and that translates as, that's shadow or shade. Now that doesn't necessarily mean literal shadow. So
Right.
there are three aspects to sombra that a person has in their life, and one's kind of, I'm going to use the term light because it's kind of a positive side. It's a more um, like elevated aspect of the shadow where you're kind of aiming for your higher self sort of thing. It's really hard to put words to this kind of thing. And then there's like a darker side, the sombra ganadera is what we call it. It's like the darker, more heavy aspect. And so I guess you could attribute that to like a light and dark paradigm. The middle one is like this, just it's your sombra as it is in this present, right? And the whole goal is to balance the lighter and darker parts of your sombras and into an integrated whole, and learn how to master both
Mhm.
from like the middle space. That's the only that's the first thing that kind of came to my mind when she said light shadow, because there's an instance there in my understanding that of shadow as like a projection of one's self in this conscious matrix that we live in. I don't know if any of that makes sense at
Yeah,
all,
I
but
think so. Basically, she saw me and she's like, "Hey, this guy's weird." I can
yeah,
talk about
well,
weird things with him.
I would imagine that if there is a correlation. Now, I'm not always a anybody who read my books knows I'm about ready to be hypocritical, but I don't always ascribe to that just like every religion and every spiritual culture across the planet are exactly the same. I think there's a lot of strong correlations and ties, of course, that are very interesting. But I would imagine if she's like a person who's really hugely attuned and she was speaking to that idea of the the sombra criandera is what we call it, that lighter aspect of the sombra, which means you are um, very safe for other people to be around. You very much lean on good intentions. You're not dishonest. You're integrous with who you are as a human being. And that's a person that would like really shine on that, like that aspect of sombra, at least in my tradition. So I imagine that that's kind of what she saw. And I don't know what tradition she's from,
Yeah, I don't
so
either.
yeah, what if their terminology is similar at all.
Could
So
be.
but that's very interesting. I mean, you do seem to me, I don't claim to have any kind of like special talents or supernatural talents, but you do seem to be a kind of person that it can be very easily open to those realms. And probably because of your introverted nature, you are highly attuned, and so you do need a break, right? Like because you receive so much data all
Yeah.
the time. And I'm actually very similar. I may not seem like it on the screen, but I mean, my wife knows, like, if we're out in public or in a situation and she can look over at me and like, oh, Daniel's ready to tap out, like we fucking need to get home. Like he can only take so much, and I have to, when it is a social situation, I have to prepare.
Yeah.
And it's not because like we hate people or things.
No, not at all.
It's just we receive so. I work in IT during the day, so I am always relating it to that, like in terms of like data, sensory input. That we observe so much, and we're absorbing so much that we have to cut ourselves off sometimes. And um for those people that are like, so when I did train in the shamanic lineage that I was a part of, the guy who trained me saw that similar kind of thing in me, where because I've had similar cases like that where someone will just randomly off the fucking street just for a while. I never even went out for years until I just learned to kind of train myself to be able to handle it better. But I would never go out because I would literally have people come up to me randomly off the street and just pour shit like that onto me. And it was just be like, what the fuck just happened? I mean, it's cool, but also it's like it can be overwhelming when it happens over and over and over again.
Right. I just had that the one time. I can't imagine a repeat because that was really shocking when it happened.
It is shocking.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely think you are attuned to like something, whether, we're just like antennas and we're just like tuning into the right frequency or whatever. I don't know how it all plays out, and I don't claim to know how it all plays out. And again, like we just said before, I would prefer not to categorize it in the sense of, this is the label of an empath, and this is what empaths do precisely versus a psychic versus it's like, whatever. It's like, nobody fucking knows.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just as bad as like, oh, well, you must have seen that in a movie. And it's like, no, I didn't. And like, it's not how it happened. You mentioned needing to prepare for social stuff. I did, full disclosure, take notes. I didn't need to refer to them once, though. I'm so proud.
That's awesome. Oh, good for you. Oh yeah, there are times when I have to, even for these interviews, like, I think actually more towards the beginning, I was like taking notes, and now I'm in this space where I'm just trying to roll with it because I feel like I'm just better get to know the person if I'm just letting it play out naturally. And that's the main reason why I'm wanting to do this anyway. It's just to get to know people and also like promote amazing work. I don't mean that in a marketing sense. Art is so important to me. It is my spiritual drive, and stuff like yours and some of the other guys in our community, guys and ladies in our community just blow me away. It's so important for people to consume.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, not only are there a lot of talented people in our circle, but they're all just so supportive,
Yeah.
one another. Like you had Rick Lopez on, and he when Dishoom 1 was on sale, he bought a copy the first 30 seconds, and then the second book he bought it before it was even announced because I put it on the store, but I didn't announce it yet, and he bought it, and so he's the first one on both of them, and just that kind of support is you can't buy that.
and even just supporting each other in the sense of talking craft with one another, helping
Absolutely.
each other out with projects. I mean, it blows me away. That was the reason why I was afraid to get into comics when I first wanted to, way back in the day, like the mid to late 90s, when I finally got out of high school and into college. I went to a few conventions and I tried to broach the realm, but it was so standoffish. There were all these gates you had to jump through to even to like get a relationship formed with someone. And now we have this community that's just so open and free, and we have amateurs mixed with legends. And we're just like always inspired every day. It's just like like, how is it that this is happening on Facebook of all places too?
That toxic arena somehow has this one bright spot.
Well, it just goes to show that it's like technology isn't bad, people. Social media isn't bad. It's just a tool. And it's just unfortunate that it's just been used for shit. But right. You can use it for something awesome and beautiful. And that's what we're doing. And it's like Ben was saying, it's like a comics religion. We all are bowing down at the altar of this community, on an almost daily basis, if not an hourly basis for some. And it pays off.
Yeah, definitely.
So I got a couple of questions for you that I'm curious about. What was the first book that really pulled you into comics? Like really, like when you read it, or if it was a series or whatever, if there was a moment, or if it was just always natural growing up. What devoted you to this religion?
For me, personally, it was definitely movies and TV before comics. I had a bootleg VHS tape with the 78 Superman and 89 Batman back to back, where a family friend had recorded that for me, and like I wore that tape out. Like my friends and I still to this day, like we know both movies word for word. We really just wore those tapes out, and so I was just completely in love with the idea of Superman since I was a young kid. And you're the perfect person to talk to about this, but I remember being maybe 5 or 6 years old and being a little like afraid of the dark side of nightlight in my room, and my uncle saw it, and he was like, "Well, what's that for?" And I'm like, "Well, sometimes I get scared of the dark." And he's like, "Well, whenever that happens, why don't you just think about Superman, because you know, as a fan, and Hanuman, and you know Hanuman from
yep,
the monkey god with super strength." And
I love Hanuman.
And like I adored the character. I even a relative of mine had a costume custom made for me. So there's a lot of photos of me as like a 5-year-old dressed with like a fake tail and everything. I was making a monkey face, and like I was in love with the idea. And so like
I'll just send a picture of you that I drew of Hanuman. I really do. I do love Hanuman so much as a being in this world. He's a lot of inspiration.
Absolutely. There's all these different gifts from different gods, and at even its most base level, it's a super powered monkey. Like what child wouldn't be drawn to that? And so for me, like, because my uncle put those things together for me in my head, the idea of superheroes and myths being one realm, that was just something that established itself for me very early on. And then little by little, I don't remember where I got my first comic book from, but I remember what it was. It was Flash number 53, and it had on the cover it had Flash and Superman running on the water, and they were racing, and it said in big letters like guest starring Superman, and like so it was very clear like the main title was Flash and Superman is the guest star, but like for whatever reason, my idiot little kid brain, I saw Superman, thought he's got to be the star of this book, and I opened it up and I take it home or whatever, and I was so disappointed that there wasn't more Superman in it. I'm like, who's this guy in red? This guy's stupid. Like, I don't like this guy, and so it was kind of a letdown. But what's funny is I later found out. Just maybe a month ago that comic was written by William Messner Loebs, and Roman Rathert from Jerk Comics, Uncle Jerk.
Yeah, he's doing some stuff to support.
Yeah, he's a huge Messner Loebs fan, and Messner Loebs unfortunately has fallen on hard times.
Yep,
and so Roman's doing a fundraiser for him, and he saw some fan art I had done of Sam Keith's The Max. And so he approached me, asked me if I wanted to get involved. And so the name sounds familiar, William Messner Loebs, and I started looking it up and I was like, okay, well, he worked on The Max, and he also wrote the first ever comic book I ever had. So it was such a no-brainer to say yes. And so I think we're unveiling that I think he already unveiled it on Instagram. I did 5 envelope sketches. I do a lot of these, hold them up, envelope sketches. Anyone who bought the first issue of Dishoom gets a free 6x9 envelope sketch of whatever I felt like drawing that day. And that's added up because I've done like over 140 envelope sketches now that have just been giving away for free. Book 2, that's stopping. Just a heads up. I wanted to really thank all the people who supported my first book, but I got to give myself a break, or the third book will never happen.
Yeah.
So Flash 53, the first comic. And then I joke about this a lot online, but it really is true that one of my earliest comic book memories is with Marvel's NFL Super Pro.
Nice. Okay.
And, where my sister, I guess, like there was some game in school and like the prize was NFL Super Pro #1, and she got it and she didn't want it. So she gave it to me, and it was a comic book, and like, again, my idiot brain, guest starring Spider-Man. Hey, this book's got Spider-Man in it. It must be good. And I had no concept of quality. So, that was just as good as any other comic as far as I was concerned. And I read that hundreds of times. And, for me, comics were kind of few and far between. It was just like birthdays, Christmas, friend's birthday party, loot bag. You might get a comic book. So like in my lifetime, I've maybe never owned more than 70 comics, with the exception of now I have 200 some Dishoom 2s in my living room. I guess this is the most comic books I've owned. But for the most part, yeah, I never like even got a full arc. Like I remember, Spider-Man fights the Sinister Six. Part 5 of 6, and I don't have 1 through 4, and I don't have 6, and so I don't know what happened before or after. So yeah, I don't know. Whatever comics I had impacted me greatly because I read them over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's really interesting.
What was your first comic?
Oh my God, what was my first comic? I don't really know, because it was sort of always a natural thing that we had around in our house. So I mean, I grew up in a really small town, and all we had was this grocery store with this rack of comics. That was like our only entry point into the outside world. I think it wasn't until later that we had like a movie rental place. Like there were, and I lived far out in the country. I mean, we just, that was like our only touch point. And so like there was like some early Spider-Mans. I know one of the earliest comics was one of those original Marvel Star Wars books, but it was like the magazine size. Gosh, who was it that did it? They were just recently at a Comic-Con here in Kansas City. I'm losing names, but very influential. But it wasn't. It was kind of like you for a while, in the sense that I didn't really collect runs. We would just get stuff every once in a while, because we never got an allowance either, and my parents were the kind of parents that you never got to get stuff. Like we had to find ways to scrounge and scrape for money in order to like get a book. But it wasn't until I was like 13, 14 that I read an issue of Uncanny X-Men that a buddy of mine had, who, shout outs to Aaron Conway, who I've had on my channel a lot. I grew up with him. He's a writer, and we work on comics together as well. So he's like my lifelong friend, and he was reading some X-Men, and I was at his house, and I picked it up and took a look at it. He collected runs. He collected everything, and he knew everything and about all the stories. And there was something about that X-Men issue that just was like, I need to go out and buy this now, and I need to start collecting. And it was X-Men 275, Uncanny X-Men 275. It was a Jim Lee book. And Scott Williams is inker, that whole run. And I don't know what it was. And I think, you mentioned about coming into the middle. And I hear this argument a lot about having to construct, and this is the Jim Shooter method of constructing comics in such a way that it could be this person's first book.
Right.
But our first books we always picked up were in the middle of shit. And we're lifelong fans, and like we're like devoted to this stuff. And I found that as I followed runs over time, I enjoyed it less. So there are a few runs that I enjoy in terms of like some graphic novels and stuff, and there were a lot of Vertigo stuff over time that I enjoyed the full run. But other than that, when it comes to just like regular mainstream comics, I really just kind of enjoy hit or miss things like that, just like little breaks and pieces and for some reason it'll just like really grab me. And that X-Men run just I don't know, it just all kind of came together for me there, and that's when I knew I was like, I'm going to do this. But then I got too scared in my undergrad and going to majoring in art. I got scared with critiques. I got scared with, I don't know. I just, was in this space where I was very hesitant, very nervous and insecure, and I didn't have a great art school experience initially. Well, art school, it was a regular college. I just majored in art. I didn't, the critiques weren't geared towards illustration. Nothing was about illustration or the form of comics. And this was, 96 through 2000 was when I was in college. So it's not like comics were taken seriously at all.
Right.
But that's what I wanted to do. But all the critiques and the curriculum just kept pushing in other directions. And so it was very hard for me to find a niche in that world. And then by the time I got out of college, and then like I mentioned earlier, I took that first foray into going to a few conventions and, trying out the waters. I think it was just way too overwhelming for me, too big, that I just like, oh, there's no way I'm going to be able to. But I didn't have like a huge tap on the underground market either. I just lived out of Wizard magazine and mainstream books. I didn't understand like the thriving world of undergrounds that existed. And it was only over time that I slowly started kind of uncovering that. And then by the time Cartoonist Kayfabe came out, it was just like, oh, there's an entry point for people. Like people can do this now. And the internet has changed and evolved, and it's easy to just make your own book and get it printed. Where do you get your books printed? I wanted to ask.
A lot of things I've done with Dishoom, I've copied and pasted from Tony McMillan. Tony McMillan. He's
I plan on having him on. I'm a huge fan.
Oh, I hope you do, because I'd love to watch that episode. He's, oh God, he's so brilliant, man. Like it almost irritates me how talented he is. He's
fast. He comes out with like 6 comics in like a week, and it's like, dude, you're making us all look old and slow, and I love him.
Yeah, oh, and he writes novels and plays guitar.
The Renaissance man.
Oh, and he has a podcast or 2 or 3. I don't know. I mean, like, Jesus, man. But yeah, like, so I remember seeing his Etsy store, and I messaged him, and I'm like, hey, I want to like copy everything the way you set it up, because I don't know how to do this, and I like the way you did it. Mm-hmm. And he's like, yeah, go for it. I stole it all from Michel Fife. And I'm like, okay, cool. and so then I didn't feel so bad about it. So yeah, I did my Etsy store because of him, and then I think he put me onto the printers, Comics Wellspring.
Yep.
A lot of guys in our circle go through them. They do great quality work. I'm really happy with the colors and everything. The service is great. It's always like shipped on time, and everything looks great. The only gripe I have about Comics Wellspring is my comic is 5.5 by 8.5, which is not standard comic book size. But 5.5 by 8.5 is just a letter size piece of paper folded in half. So it's a very standard size at most printing companies.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, through Comics Wellspring, that counts as a custom size when I print through them. And so because of that, it costs just as much as if I had a 9 by 12 book.
Oh, whoa. That's weird.
And so I may have to, for financial reasons, explore other avenues. But for anyone working with traditional American comic size, highly recommend them. They're fantastic.
Yeah, I used them for my print runs to prep for Comic-Con, and I was pretty happy. There was one little piece I'll warn people on, and it was probably just because I'm an amateur. So I collected Psychonaut Presents 1 through 4 in a trade paperback, and I did that through Comics Wellspring, and unfortunately, let's see, I think I have a copy here, and I hope this doesn't impede my sales at any cons going forward, but the margins aren't 100%. Like the image kind of bleeds into the margin in the a little bit. It's good enough, like you can still read the whole thing and it's fine.
Right.
But to my eye, there's this, little bit of breathing room here on the sides, but it kind of goes in a little too much. Now the quality overall is good, but when on the proof, that the digital proof they sent,
Yeah.
there was no way to like understand, okay, you have this much spine and you need to account for that. I assumed that was just going to be accounted for.
No,
Um,
it's unfortunate. Like I'm a graphic designer by day, and so like look up creep, like CREEP, like when you're setting up your pages, because like the thicker the book, the more you have to account for that. And so like you'll see
yeah.
designers actually have to adjust the space when the page count is really high, or you just have to have way bigger margins, which is also an option.
Now, what's weird is and a lot of people bulk at Kablam, but I normally have gone through Kablam just to get it out there. So they put it on Indie Planet immediately. Indie Planet's like the distributor for Kablam, and it's
Okay.
like all print on demand. So your comic immediately gets out there and then they'll just print it up. The problem is it's a little more expensive for people. So I do want to go another route. But when they sent me a proof of this, they didn't like, they just took my files and their copy of it, it was perfect. The margins were
Oh, that's so
perfect. Like
strange.
they had lined it up good. So they're pretty good about that, but they don't have the best. Well, I don't want to say they don't have the best. I think they only have like one person working customer service at
Oh,
all. I
wow.
don't think they have a huge team. So
Hmm.
if there's an issue, they do their best, to get back to you and to work on it, but they have so many people submitting stuff. I think it just takes
Right.
a while, and it takes a while from when you make a submission for when it goes live too, because they're backed up so much, and COVID killed that for them too. So they're even more backed up now. And I'm kind of looking for other options too. I was kind of looking into Amazon's uh, options because Rick Veitch really likes it a lot. Um, and
Jerome Cabanatan, I'm pretty sure, does his stuff through Amazon. He'd be a
yeah,
good person to talk to.
yeah, I'm actually going to have him on next week. I think
Oh,
we're
awesome.
scheduling. So
He's a great guy.
I'll talk to him about that then. But yeah, I'm kind of looking at other options. It's just, trying to find the best option to get it accessible to people, but also that they don't have to pay an arm and leg. I don't want a person to have to pay the same amount as the comic for shipping. That just seems
Right.
so fucking weird. But I mean, I guess we're kind of just in that world. But
Unfortunately, yeah. Like I have, like for the longest time for issue one, Etsy wouldn't let me ship to Canada. I don't know why. So no one in Canada could buy the physical copy of my first book, and now it's since changed. And so I had my first Canadian sale for a physical copy through the Etsy store just the other day, and so the book the price is $10 and the shipping was like 14 or something.
God.
And then Barry Tan, who's also in Ghost Agents,
Mhm.
he's in the Philippines and he bought a copy and it was the same shipping price. And I can't believe like shipping to Toronto is the same as shipping to the Philippines.
It's weird.
And then I
No,
heard someone told me recently that that seems to be an anomaly when you do it through Etsy for some reason.
huh?
I don't know why.
Odd. I tried to set up it because I talked to Tony about the same thing. I set
Oh
up an
yeah,
Etsy store,
yeah.
and based upon his advice, I got one sale through there, and suddenly, for some reason, my store got flagged
Oh wow.
and got shut down,
Oh
and
no.
they couldn't tell me why. I sent out multiple messages. Customer service did not ever get an answer why, and then just about a week or so ago, this was like for over a month, and then about a week or so ago, it just came back up, and it's available, but all the books are down, and so they like
Oh.
completely erased all the books. So I'm like, what? That's odd, and nobody could give me an explanation. So it's like, whatever.
Sucks. I'm sorry. So do you have like another store now or
I just on my website, I just have the images of the books, and then when people click on it, it sends a link to my email address because I still have stock from Comic Con. I ordered a shit ton of books for Planet Comic Con in Kansas City in April. And then I realized, oh, these giant Comic Cons, nobody buys comics. They just go for cosplay. I was
right?
literally told that 90% of the people that came to my booth, like, oh, I don't buy comics. Okay. So I got a lot of stock left. Now I do have a couple of smaller conventions I'm going to, one this weekend and another one in September. So I'm hoping to kind of get rid of some, but also I'm open to anybody that ever wants to purchase directly through me. I'm just not good about promoting this sort of thing.
It's tough. It's
Like,
like another full-time job on top of everything else.
yeah, I mean, that's, I was just talking to Ben about that, because he asked about being published through an actual publisher with my books. And I was like, it's no different.
Right.
They don't unless you're like already a best-selling author, they
Yeah.
don't publicize your books. You're on your own. You have to be your own publicist completely and make your own brand. And so like what's the point then? Why don't I just create my own stuff then instead of going through a publisher? I don't get it. So I mean at least I have like all full control then of everything. So I don't know. There's a lot of options. I got one more question for you, and then we'll wrap up. Unless you have something else.
It's probably a little close to my bedtime, to be
Well,
honest.
you've already surpassed Ben Granoff as the
Good.
most
No,
time.
let's do the last question. We can't just stop with one question left, but then we can after that.
Yeah, I mean, all of this is a competition to like be better than Ben. We all know that.
I tell him every day. I send him a message. I'm going to beat you. I'm like, what are you talking about?
He's like, Sam J. Royale's got this like weird thing with me, man.
I love talking to Ben. He's so smart and like so
yeah.
knowledgeable with comics. So, he literally teaches comics. I mean, like always respect any critique I get from him. I love working with him.
Yep.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, that's why I told him. I was like, you're a teacher through and through. Every conversation with you is a learning experience, and and not in a way where I feel like I'm being taught to. Like it just comes through.
Yeah.
It's awesome. No, I do have a final question. So I asked about your first comic. What does 90-year-old Sam J. Royale look like? But what is your kind of end result of like your creative path, and where are you going to get to that point where you've reached that creative fulfillment? What does that look like? Does that mean you're like George Lucas and you're sitting on billions of dollars worth of IPs, or is it just, really I have like these like few stories I wanted to tell, or I at least want one job at Marvel or whatever it is? Like, where's that satisfaction?
If billions of dollars are going to present themselves to me, I'm not going to fight it. But
that can't be your answer. Not allowed.
Yeah, realistically, that's not really something I think about much, too much. I got this shelf behind me. Let's say if I could fill one level of that shelf exclusively with my own work, and show that to my very disinterested grandkids, I think that would be a really great goal to have. This is what I picture. I picture a family, and I picture a good body of work.
Yeah.
I'm
not gonna lie, that is almost the exact image I have. Actually have a shelf I'm building up of my works, and that's like my image of like being able to show my grandkids like my stuff, and them hopefully being interested though, and not disinterested.
Granddad used to do something cool. Like, no one cares about superheroes. No one cares about comic books. Well, it's all cosplay now, Grandpa.
Right. Yeah. Well, what's funny is I thought I was doing this, that one of the compulsions of me getting into this is like, it would be so cool for my kids for me to get into this stuff. And they're into this thing. They're watching the Marvel movies, whatever. And they're into cool sci-fi stuff. And
that's great.
I started getting into making comics and stuff, and you couldn't find a more disinterested group. They could fucking care less. They're just like, whatever, that's just dad. It's like, it doesn't matter. If it's your child, they're not going to fucking care.
Because it's normal. It's normalized.
Yeah. It's more of a novelty when they're really young, but like once they start getting into those older years and teenage years, they just want to be away from you. So I'm really looking forward to granddad years for sure. Yeah, I'm with you on that, man. That is my, I do see a front porch and a hound dog and a bottle of whiskey and a shotgun in my purview as well.
Bottle of
But
whiskey. I left that out. That's actually, I have one on the top shelf behind the proofs of Dishoom 1. This ties in because, like, my brother-in-law in 2020, my birthday that year, he gave me a bottle of Blue Label, and I promised myself I wasn't going to open it until I finished Dishoom 2. And so I only cracked that open like 2 weeks ago. I was very proud of myself.
oh, that's awesome. That's so cool. Are you a big whiskey fan in general?
I mean, not huge, but I do enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You?
Yeah, probably too much. I love whiskey so much. I won't even really drink other drinks because I especially have like 100 proof or more, and it doesn't really, I don't really gauge price with like the quality, and I
No.
don't think you really can. Um, but just stuff that's like very okay, like Knob Creek and Woodford Reserve are two of my go-tos because they just have that like really strong oaky, just punch. I love it.
Writing down Knob Creek right now. Taking a lot of notes here.
Yeah, we got all kinds of notes. I've got tons. No, yeah, I love Knob Creek, and it's just it's so uh it's so thick. It just feels like you're drinking out of a barrel, a cask barrel. And if you like that kind of thing, and it's the closest thing, it doesn't, I mean, I like Scotch and I like the smokiness of Scotch, but
Mhm.
sometimes the smokiness is a little raw in certain Scotches. It doesn't hit the way that, like, if you're standing around a grill or like a smoker, and that's the way I feel with Knob Creek for some reason. And
Huh.
maybe it's because I just did a lot of barbecuing with Knob Creek in hand and I've associated the two in my brain. But yeah, and it's usually 100 proof, and I just really love 100 proof because I don't like just drinking a ton and still like, man, I'm not drunk yet.
See, I
So
never have to worry about that. I'm a lightweight, so it's easy for me. But yeah, I
to
understand.
calm the nerves a little bit at the end of
Yeah,
the
you
night,
need. I
right?
mean, that's why you start, right? I mean,
But congratulations on the opening your Blue Label. That's fucking great. It's awesome to have that kind of milestone.
yeah, I'm really
And
proud of that.
it's an accomplishment, man. You should be proud. These are amazing books.
Thanks so much.
So I'm like really happy to have them in my collection, of course.
Thank you. And I really appreciate you doing this. This is probably the most fun I had with one of these things before. So,
Oh, thank you. I've had a ball too. I would really like to connect with you some more and like
oh, absolutely.
talk some more. I feel like I could talk with you for a long time. So
Yeah, well, whenever you're up for it,
cool.
sure.
All right. Well, in that case, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and let you go, and everyone
Oh, you know
out
what?
there.
One more, I better mention the links. I got to mention the links,
Oh
right?
my God.
I just
That's
realized.
horrible. I'm going to edit that out. I can't believe
No,
so
keep it in. It's fine.
link away.
All right. So the books, etsy.com/shop/Sam J Royale, SAMJROYALE. And my wife also put together the t-shirt store, the one I'm wearing with the SJR logo. And then there's this Dishoom logo. There's other logos too that are all from the book. And that link is dishoom.creator-spring.com.
Awesome. I'll put those links in the description
Sure.
of the video as well. So, yeah, please go out there and buy up, support this man.
Thanks. Appreciate
All
it.
right, cool. Thanks again, Sam. And we'll talk to you later. Everybody out there, keep it psycho.
Bye.
Yeah.